Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Revernos. In today's video, we'll be talking about exception handling in Python. An exception is just another word for error, so we'll be talking about how you can handle errors in your Python programming. This will allow you to make sure your applications don't crash and that they'll be able to continue to run and then do what they have to do to process an error. So we'll be using a pretty simple test case for this. We'll just be creating a division function. So this function takes an x and y as input and then returns x divided by y. So let's go ahead and run that. And we'll just call this division function. Let's just pass in two random numbers. We'll pass in 10 and 7. And you can see we get about 1.4, so this function is working as intended. So let's say we decide to do 1 and 0. And you see we get a zero division error because we're returning x divided by y, and anything divided by 0 is undefined. So that's why we're getting this zero division error. So what can we do about this? Well, we're going to implement some exception handling into our code. So what we're going to do is we'll use a try except clause. And so I'll type that in right now. So I have try. And here we'll do return x divided by y. And then we'll have except, and we'll return error. So what is it saying? Try is what you want to do or what you want to attempt to do, and then except is what happens if you have an error. And we'll talk about how to handle specific types of errors later in this video. But except will run if there's any kind of error. So any error and the except clause will run. And if there's no error, the try clause will run without any issues and the except clause will not run. So let's go ahead and see what happens if we do 1 divided by 0 now. Now you can see we're getting this error as opposed to getting this zero division error because we have an except clause which runs when we have an error. We're now just returning error. So now let's deal with the case where you want to deal with different types of errors separately. You can actually do that with exception handling in Python too. So once again, we'll just copy this function and we're going to make some changes. So let's say we want to deal with the zero division error by saying you cannot divide by 0. So how can we do that? Because this will run for any kind of error. If we want to specify something for a specific type of error, well, we can copy the name of our error, which we'll do now, and then we'll just paste that after our except keyword. So now this is saying try to do x divided by y, and if we get a zero division error, we'll return you cannot divide by 0. So this except clause will only run on a zero division error, which we'll see in a second. So now let's once again do 1 divided by 0, and we say you cannot divide by 0. So let's see what happens if we have another type of error. So let's turn this 1 into the string equivalent of 1, and then run that. Now you can see we're still getting a type error. So we do try to do x divided by y. And if we get an error, if it's a zero division error, then we'll run this. But if it's not a zero division by error, we don't have any other way of dealing with that. And so we just get this error. So how can we deal with multiple kinds of error? So once again, let's go ahead and copy and paste this function, and we'll add another except, and this time we'll deal with a type error. And here we'll return, you can only do math with numbers. So now if we were to run this, we'll get you can only do math with numbers, and if we just have a division by 0 error, we'll say you cannot divide by 0. There's also a case where you might not want to deal with having two except clauses. For example, let's say you want every error to get the same output for these two types of errors. Well, you can actually consolidate this. So once again, we'll copy and paste that, and we'll do zero division error or type error. And when you do this, you actually have to put that inside of parentheses, and we'll just return you cannot divide by 0, and we'll say and you can only do math with numbers. And then we can delete this clause. So now what we're saying is do x divided by y, and if you have a zero division error or a type error, then this is what we'll return. And so we can go ahead and paste this and check that it's working the way we intended. And you can see now we're getting the same output for zero division errors and type errors. The last two things I'll be showing you in this video are else and finally. So what is else? Else is the same keyword that you can find in an if-else statement, but in this context, else will only run if there is no error. So let's go ahead and look at an example of that. So once again, let's go ahead and copy and paste this function, and let's add an else clause. And here, we'll just print anything random. So let's just say there was no error. Because remember, in the context of a try except, else only runs if there is no error. And actually, let's change all of these returns to print statements. And we'll do that because once you return something in Python, of course, that just exits your function. So this print statement would never run because you would return something before you get there. So we'll just go ahead and change these to prints. All right, and now let's do, actually it only runs if there is no error. So let's do 1 divided by 1. You'll see that gives you 1 and then says there is no error. Let's do something that does give an error. And it says you cannot divide by 0. And of course, this there is no error does not run because else only runs if there is no error. Now let's say you want something that will always run regardless of whether there is or is not an error. Well, that's what the finally clause would do. So let's change this else to finally. And let's change this to there may or may not be an error. Because even if there is an error or if there is not an error, the finally clause will always run. In this context, it really doesn't make sense to use a finally statement. But let's say you're dealing with files and you always want to close a file regardless of whether your read or write operations failed, then you would use a finally and you could close that file. And then you'll see here, even though we run it, we have an error and it says you cannot divide by 0 and there may or may not be an error because we have that to print from our finally statement. And let's look at a case where there is an error. We still have that finally statement running. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. Also, we have a lot of great content on our channel, and we have a lot of great content coming in the future about Python programming, data analytics, machine learning, physical computing using Raspberry Pis, and cloud computing and Amazon Web Services. So make sure you subscribe so you can view all of those videos coming in the future and support the channel. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.